had the worst pain you've ever felt.
Story 1: Trigeminal neuralgia. It's called the suicide disease for a very good reason. It felt like my jaw was being crushed in a vice. The pain is beyond description. An episode would last for 8 to 10 hours, and no painkiller touched it. I would hit my head on things trying to knock myself out. For comparison, I was getting an X-ray for a bad backache, and when I gave the urine sample you have to give first, the tech saw that I had stones in it, kidney stones. My bad backache was kidney stones. TN really recalibrates your pain meter. Nothing goes past a 6 anymore. I had brain surgery 9 years ago to fix it, and it's the best decision I ever made. I'm nervous because it's often not a permanent fix, and I'm afraid it will come back, but I'm so thankful to be pain-free for now. Story 2: When I was a kid, I was prone to ear infections, so I got some tubes put in my ears. Later, wanting to avoid any further ear infections, my mom put some rubbing alcohol in my ears as swimmers do sometimes to clear out any standing water. Worst pain I can imagine, like a hand grenade constantly going off in my head. I was thrashing and shrieking hysterically, and cried for nearly an hour after. She didn't believe that it was actually painful, so she did it again the next week, and the week after made me do it myself. I was convinced by that point that I was just a wimp and needed to get over it, so I did. She came upstairs because she heard my screams, from downstairs. Through 2 doors and 2 pillows I had jammed on either side of my head to muffle the sound. We went to a doctor. He saw that the tubes were still in my ears. Asked what would happen if, hypothetically, one was to put rubbing alcohol into their ears. Oh, it would be unimaginably painful. The alcohol would fully stimulate every single nerve inside their ears. No one would ever let you do that. Still not quite over it. Story 3: Kidney stones. The main was 9 millimeters. They had to shoot me up with morphine and I ended up getting surgery where they stuck a tube up my junk along with a laser basket and a camera. Story 4: Breaking my femur 4 weeks ago. Someone nailed me with their car going about 40. I fell down, and initially I felt Oklahoma, but when I tried to get up, my leg wouldn't move, and it was twisted behind me in a nasty way, so I started screaming. I didn't feel a lot of pain until they straightened it out and put it in traction. When I got to the ER they tried to adjust the traction, but it got up and my bones sort of sprung back into the broken shape. I can't even begin to describe what that felt like. I was already on a load of morphine from the ambulance ride, but I screamed like a hyena giving birth. It's what I imagine going to feels like. Just constant unbearable pain that never lets up. A couple of my friends work at that hospital, and they said they could hear me screaming on the next floor. It hurt so bad, I barely noticed when they inserted a catheter and shoved a finger in my to check for internal bleeding. I said to the nurse, as long as it doesn't hurt as bad as my leg does right now, I don't give a boys and girls. You don't ever want to get hit by a car, and you definitely don't ever want to break your femur in half. Sucks. The love of my life telling me that she is leaving me for another guy. And then being forced to see them together a few weeks later looking like they have been together forever, and our friends acting like I was never with her in the first place. Story 5: Physically. Getting stung by a blue bottle Portuguese man-o-war is its actual name. I think it got the back of my leg, and when I realized what it was I grabbed where the tail would be to pull it off my leg. A terrible idea, as then my hand and leg felt like they were on fire. It made my heart race so fast. I won't forget that pain anytime soon. Story 6: After cleaning my shelf in the dark I decided to jump. I didn't notice the thin backrest of the chair below me. I hit it so hard right in my anus I believed it went really deep. It was so painful I thought I was going to die. Story 7: I lost the top of my pinky finger to a steel bulkhead on a ship. The bulkhead crushed the top of my finger from a second knuckle into pulp. I almost blacked out from the pain. I also almost lost the whole finger. I have a nub now. Story 8: I have actually recently discussed this in another thread about what was not what you expected, but it fits here too, so I'm just going to copy-paste the reply here. Carolina Reaper pods. I expected them to be hot, obviously, but not even close to how hot they actually turned out to be. It was like gargling the of Satan himself. I am accustomed to hot foods and that near killed me. Me and 5 other dudes, all big chili fans, stood around one tub of Ben & Jerry's peanut butter flavor ice cream with spoons, 2 pans filled with water because glasses were too small. A loaf of bread, torn to bits by 6 savages trying to cool the fires of that were burning through our mouths and stomachs. 1010, would nearly die again. Story 9: Third most painful fight at school and got the kicked out of me. Woke up, couldn't see out of my right eye. Second most painful, rode a bike with no handlebar grips and I fell over. Side of the handlebar made of metal hit my chest and friction burned it from my belly button to the top of my chest. Had a red trail blazed all over my chest for around 6 years. Surprisingly, being 8 I didn't cry. Most painful, dentist removed a back tooth with what seemed like a wrench and not enough anesthesia. Story 10: I got circumcised when I was 12. Rite of passage in Filipino culture. All of my cousins were amping me up and scaring me leading up to it. When it was finished, I was walking and everything was alright. I got home, laid down on my bed, wore some loose shorts, and I was just chilling playing with my DS. Boy, let me tell you, when the anesthesia wore off, it felt like I was burning, like someone literally ripped the skin off, which they technically did. I cried for like an hour. I took my painkillers and eventually it subsided. The week and a half of recovery was even worse. Imagine having gauze stuck to your... I had to sit in the tub with warm water to take it off because it hurt that much. Getting boners were terrible, as mine would just be squeezed by the gauze when I'd get hard. I was 12 at the time, and random boners were the norm going through puberty. Life sucked for about a week and a bit. But after that everything was Gucci TLDR. Remembered the pain of being circumcised, getting boners. Story 11. Sitting outside in the snow for like 4 hours, freezing stiff, and then jumping straight into a really warm bath as soon as I get home. I literally screamed in agony even though I was alone. Story 12. IUD insertion went wrong. Doc tried to remove it and it got stuck. Next step was to grab an instrument that looked like a crochet hook to try and grab it, then that got stuck. Every time they pulled on it, I would scream out from the muscle spasm it was causing in my cervix. My vision would go black when she pulled. Ended up having to have it surgically removed. Story 13. Had a lumbar puncture for suspected meningitis. They tickled my brachial nerve, felt like my entire was being crushed, and my leg was having electric shocks at the same time. I was in so much pain I tore a tendon in my neck screaming at it. I have been reminded it was a ligament, not a tendon. Story 14. The world's spiciest hot dog. I was living in Sweden at the time, and my Mexican friend and I hear about some hot dog stand selling the world's spiciest hot dog, being of Southeast Asian and Mexican extraction, respectively. We scoffed the idea of any Swede serving the spiciest anything. Hearing of how anyone who could eat it would win some t-shirt. Okay, we were young and stupid, and not being smart enough to look up in advance that they were using the world's spiciest chili peppers. We go there. The man at the stand proceeds to grill some sausages with a slit cut in them, and baste them with a spicy marinade whose fumes made us tear up and cough. We also have to sign a legal waiver. We have to wear gloves and have only 5 minutes to eat them to win. Pints of milk are set out in case we need it, at the cost of $5 each. A third contestant joins, a meek-looking Swedish woman encouraged to join by her date. First date. The timer starts, and the hot dog vendor immediately starts screaming insults and profanities at us. The Swedish woman gives up after eating 1 bite. I start trembling by the 50 point and give up after eating 70. My Mexican friend gives up with only 1 bite remaining, as he says he could feel his throat closing up. I drink 2 pints of milk, which does next to nothing. The relief of the milk touching my tongue lasts basically a half second. The maximum tongue burning only relents about 30 minutes after we gave up. As we head back home, a pain starts emanating from my stomach. In the heat of the moment I had forgotten that with my mild lactose intolerance I can't consume milk, much less a whole quart. At home the cramps become insanely intense, and I'm not even sure if it was the chili peppers or milk causing the pain. I sit in the shower, somewhat soothed by the hot water. It feels like someone is stabbing me repeated in the abdomen. I sit on the toilet in futility. I then simultaneously try to throw up. I have a drain on the bathroom floor, and was planning to just hose down whatever. Although I don't vomit, some of the sauce comes up, and the spiciness coats my whole mouth again. Also, both bathroom functions cause mild burning. I start bawling. The cramps don't really stop, but I manage to fall asleep from exhaustion at 4 a.m. The cramps don't stop until 3 p.m. the next day, never again. Story 15. I had a weird thing where the edges of my toenails grew in instead of forward, which caused a lot of ingrowns. The podiatrist decided to apply acid to the cuticles to keep the edges from growing. That wasn't the painful part. To numb me up, he pushed the needle all the way through either side of each toe, and releases the Novocaine as he pulls the needle out again. Story 16. I have a medical condition called vaginismus. So any attempt at PIV, I've never been stabbed with a hot knife, but I imagine that's what it feels like. Broke my toe, chipped a bone in my ankle, accidentally poured boiling water on my foot. Hurts worse. I don't date anymore. I was at my friend's house when I was like 15 or so, and I was just kind of standing around watching whatever was on TV without paying much attention to anything. While I was zoned out, my friend's little brother sneaked up to me and smacked me in the nuts with a mashunga. He hit me in just the right way to where it not only nailed me directly and the nuts missed the completely, but it also hit them back up into my stomach. I threw up instantly. Story 17. Kid's head got stuck banging my pelvis during birth. Literally had about 7 midwives doctors run in and try a handful of emergency maneuvers, one being having 2 of them literally go elbow deep to try and turn the baby and release him from being trapped behind my pelvis. I don't know if the pain was worse or the sight of blood covering the whole of the delivery room floor, so yeah, in short, 2 midwives elbow deep in me without as much as buying me a drink beforehand. But thank you, amazing women, your job is a tough one. Story 18. Gout. Jesus Christ, it doesn't around. I've had several attacks and it literally is the worst pain I can imagine, like someone scraping the inside of your joints with the point of a knife. The worst attack was in my wrist hand. I could hardly take the pain just lying it down on my bed caused. Story 19. I had my wisdom teeth removed when I still lived in Germany, where they don't really do general anesthesia or hardcore pain medications. Knowing how bad the opiate epidemic in my country is, I really don't blame them. I was put under local anesthesia, so the operation itself, despite being terrifying, was painless. But boy, let me tell you, when that lidocaine wore off, it was unbearable. The worst part is that it was constant, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. That was a rough couple of days before it started getting better. TLDR wisdom tooth extraction with no pain medications afterwards. Story 20. Uraro wrote this in response to a similar question: run over by a truck, 19 broken bones, punctured lung and concussion with a major immediate injuries. It actually did not hurt at first, not even the first hour or two while the first responders were opening the car with the jaws of life. I passed out from lack of oxygen during extraction, thankfully, but the morphine dose was not correct, or I did not process it normally, and I overdosed and went into respiratory arrest. The pain was so severe my son-in-law told me he could hear me screaming when he got off the elevator. they put me in a medically induced coma for several days. I was on 3 diff pain meds for 6 months, and the first 4 months were pure never-ending pain, only dulled. I sometimes get cramps, inside of my very own, but it hurts very, very much. Story 21. Myocarditis. It's an infection of the heart. I was 16. I went to sleep late after a long session of playing WoW. My chest felt a bit heavy, but nothing too bad. I thought it was that last cigarette I smoked in a rush before bed. I woke around 4 a.m. and I was essentially paralyzed. Moving pretty much any part of my body sent waves of electric needly pain from the middle of my heart all the way throughout my torso. I gathered all the courage I could muster and tried to call my mom's attention. She was sleeping in the room upstairs. On top of mine, I managed to let out a loud enough grunt cry for her to hear. After that it's a blur of pain, nurses, ambulance and doctors. I had to stay in the ICU for almost 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks in a regular hospital room. It sucked big time. Story 22. Menstruation pain. That level of pain have only happened 3 times. First time it happened, I was on vacation and brought in by ambulance because the doctor first thought it was a twisted intestine that needed to be operated. Yay. Story 23. My daughter was born with a diaphragmatic hernia. Along with that, she was born just before 29 weeks, which meant that the hospital couldn't do a corrective surgery without approval and she couldn't do ECMO because it would kill her, so for 2 days we watched as she slowly declined with the NICU doing everything they could. After 2 days of her suffering, not being able to breathe, she passed away in my wife's arms. The worst part was watching her, sedated over those 2 days. I think her passing was more relief that she was finally done suffering. This happened in January of this year. Still think about it and live through it in my mind very often. My wife never got to see her when she wasn't sedated. Didn't get to see her active and kicking. I did since I went down to the NICU with the doctors and nurses after she was born. We didn't get to hold her until the second night when the doctors knew there was no real chance of her surviving, since it required maneuvering her and all of her lines that went every which way. Story 24. Waking up with a dry throat a week after my tonsillectomy. Also I slept through needing to take hydrocodone. I was delirious with pain, definitely a 10, hurt worse than giving birth or having a spinal tap, honestly. Story 25. I had to have a C-section after about 23 hours of labor. In recovery, the epidural wore off but they couldn't get the morphine flowing. It kept backing up into the 4. That pain was worse than every contraction I felt put together. Thank Jeebus for the hormones that make you forget childbirth because that was awful. Now I just know I was in pain, but I don't remember the pain, if that makes sense. Story 26. I have experienced mortal pain several times in my life, and realized recently that any one of those experiences could have killed me. As a result, I am no longer afraid of the pain of dying. The following were all roughly equivalent: chemical explosion and severe lacerations requiring large skin grafts. Bandages and gauze ripped from those wounds prior to grafts. Gallstone spinal surgery aftermath. Story 27. Having a tooth abscess over Christmas. It reached a peak on the 27th. I was in London and meant to travel that day, but King's Cross was closed because of engineering work going wrong. Had to swill freezing cold water around my mouth every 10 seconds to hold back the unimaginable pain. Had to spend the day storming round London to all the hospitals we could get to trying to get painkillers, but they all assumed I was a junkie and wouldn't do it. Didn't sleep for 48 hours. Eventually did the 6-hour train journey home and got a dentist appointment for some root canal. I once dislocated my knee and broke my wrist in a fall, and would take that over the tooth abscess any day. Story 28. Childbirth. Not as bad as I thought, but yeah, it's up there. Kidney infection. It landed me in the ICU for 2 weeks. Morphine. -4 broken ribs. At once I was told to take a nap. It'll get better in a month or so. Story 29. My friend gouged my cornea with his fingernail real good while playing football. The injury left a subtle flap on the surface of my eye. Keeping my eye open or closed was brutal. I had to go see an emergency specialist who put on a non-prescriptive contact lens for a week as an eye band-aid to let the wound heal. The pain without the contact lens was unbearable. Story 30. Spontaneous pneumothorax, collapsed lung. Had 5 of them in my 20s. Feels like someone pushing a samurai sword in your back every time you take a breath. I thought that was bad enough, but on the last one they injected some kind of solution into my chest cavity, described to me as a talcum powder type solution, to cause the lining to become inflamed and form scar tissue so that my lung would stick to it. It was excruciating. Felt like they literally took a cup of hot lava and poured it into my chest. They gave me all the pain meds they could and I was still begging for more. Literally thought I was going to pass out from the pain. Story 31. I had an issue with my for a while where the tubes carrying blood away from them weren't doing it properly, causing one of my to make more and more veins to try and get the blood away. I had this for about 3 years, coming usually every 6 months, lasting for 6 months. One time it came back, it brought along a hydrocele. For those of you who are lucky enough to not know what a hydrocele is, it's basically a buildup of fluid that is extremely painful. Well, I had one of these on the bottom of the same nut that was having issues already. I literally wanted to die every second of my life for at least 6 months. I could barely move at all. It would take me 5 to 10 minutes of excruciating pain to get a glass of water 20 feet away. I didn't leave my house for half of a year. It was the absolute worst part of my life by far, and I've been trying to get back to normal ever since. Surgery was over a year ago. Story 32. When I was in middle school, someone threw one of those master lock combination locks at the back of my head. It has to be the closet thing to bring hit with a hammer. I bled like a stuffed pig and ended up getting staples in my head. That was 20 years ago and nothing before it or since compares to the pain, and I've had a vasectomy and vasectomy reversal. Story 33 Cervical cryosurgery. Got diagnosed with HPV 2 years ago and they found precancerous cells on my cervix. Went to the OBGYN for 2 rounds of cervical cryosurgery, aka stick a freezing cold rod on your cervix and freeze the cells so they die. The actual procedure didn't hurt any more than menstrual cramps, but while I thought I wanted to die for the 4 hours after, I have a high pain tolerance, but this was worse than anything I had ever felt. I passed out from the pain, and on top of all that you basically pee yourself for weeks because of the thawing and dead skin cells. Not how I wanted to spend spring break senior year of college. Story 34 IBS sufferer here. I actually had the worst ever pain yesterday. Every 5 minutes it was like someone had punched my stomach, fist of the North Star style. I did get run over before by a car, and my foot was pinned for 10 to 15 seconds underneath it. The pain only started about 30 minutes after it happened when I was in the ambulance. The whole foot was swollen, the skin had been ripped open, there was a friction burn around the wound, but somehow the saving grace was that none of my foot's bones were broken, but the IBS beats the pain that car caused me. Story 35 Finding out my fiancé was not going to survive. It was like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't cry, I was frozen in fear there in the hospital room. Time stopped as the pain in my chest radiated to my extremities, and literally all of me was enveloped in an excruciating dull ache. Even now, 3 months later, I can remember the feeling. Story 36 Possibly when I had a spinal stroke. When it was happening it felt like all the pain and heat sensation nerves in my back were having one last hurrah, pure agonizing fire for a few hours. Seems like it didn't want anything to steal its record, as since it happened I can barely feel pain anywhere from my chest down. It didn't count on the cluster headaches though, which started a year later. Imagine someone sticking a red-hot needle into the back of your eye and wiggling it around for an hour or so, looking forward to December and being woken up by them again. At least they have gradually gotten less bad over the years. Story 37 I had a sinus infection and consequently, a lot of pressure built up in my ears. I had to take a plane trip and the pressure from the cabin combined with the pressure already in my head legitimately felt like my eardrum was going to pop. It continued for pretty much the whole 3-hour plane ride. Fortunately, the cabin was dark so no one could see the tears of pain streaming down my face. Story 38 I'm resistant to numbing. So not only did I feel most of everything when I had my wisdom teeth removed, the painkillers they prescribed me did all one day. The pain was spreading throughout my whole head and was so intense I couldn't stand on my legs. Had to go to the ER and get a morphine shot to feel better. And while high they checked the holes that the teeth left. One was not plugged well enough and a small bit of food was stuck on the exposed nerve. Removed that and prescribed me better painkillers. Story 39 Dentist gave me whatever the injection is that numbs you up, waits a bit, tests to see that I'm numb. I say no, I can feel it, so he gives me another one, rinse and repeat. Don't know why the stuff wouldn't work. Eventually he just decides it and drills straight into my tooth and I felt everything. He was honestly shocked when I nearly jumped right out of the chair. The procedure went on and it was the most painful experience of my life. The whole time him telling me it can't hurt that bad. Thankfully it was very short. Kept waking up in a cold sweat for the next month having nightmares about it. Don't go to that dentist anymore. Story 40 Tooth pain. I was in absolute agony for 3 weeks, had trouble sleeping, couldn't eat properly and had a sharp, throbbing pain nearly 247 pretty much. My regular dentist wasn't available at first and the dentist who saw me gave me antibiotics and told me to come back in a week. Had an abscess that was seriously infecting my tooth and needed draining. Saw my regular dentist a week later and told her to remove the tooth altogether. Getting my tooth removed actually hurt less than suffering from the infection. Story 41 Definitely not my worst pain, but a unique one, swallowing a pill without water and having it catch in my throat. Q 30 minutes of constantly drinking water to stave off a literal chemical burn in my throat. Would not recommend. Story 42 Not realizing that I had an ear infection until about halfway through a 3-hour flight. I felt like my head was going to explode, was pretty much sitting there silently, head in my hands, tears streaming down my face. The descent was absolutely one of the best feelings of relief I've ever had. Story 43 I rope burned some holes in my hand and fingers. I had grabbed onto a dog leash while the dog was excitedly running around and didn't realize it until I had already walked away and it started to sting. I have a pretty high pain tolerance so it didn't hurt me as much as it would, say, my housemate whose tolerance is low, but did it hurt for the rest of that day. On the positive side, it was pretty cool to watch my hand heal itself as it filled the holes melted sections of my fingers back in. Story 44 Dislocated my left kneecap. Looked down to see my kneecap on the side of my leg versus where it should have been. Just slipped the sucker back in place. Almost blacked out, and off to the hospital we went. Story 45 9 out of 10 period cramps. Only time I have ever thrown up because of pain in my life. 8 out of 10 getting an IUD inserted. 4 out of 10 for reference tearing my ACL, MCL and meniscus in my knee. Story 46 Probably this one calf cramp I got one morning. No joke, I've broken bones, had severe intestinal cramp and obstructed kidneys. But that one cramp was the most intense, nightmarish pain I have ever experienced. It lasted about 2 minutes, but that was more than enough. I pulled up my trouser leg to look and the back of my leg was fully caved in and wriggling like I had worms under my skin. That was probably the only pain I've ever felt that I would legit describe as excruciating. I was full on screaming and roaring with the pain. Story 47. I had a surgery where they cut through both sides of my jawbone and slid it forward, screwing permanent metal plates to where the gap would be. Man, there is no pain like bone pain, especially in your face. Story 48. Close call between getting a migraine and falling headfirst off my horse after it galloped straight into a wire fence and did a front flip. I reckon the fall would have hurt worse if I'd been more awareless, concussed and woozy, but still, everything hurt like a... Story 49. OC spray in the military. Seriously, I've been stabbed and shot. I'd rather get shot again than have OC in my eyes. And the worst is if you manage to get it on the nether region in the shower. That kidney stone, I didn't know what was wrong, and I had to drive myself to the hospital. I even interviewed for a job with a kidney stone. Worst pain ever. Also expensive when you're just a student without a job. One time I was taking a shower before one of my cheerleading competitions, and as I was washing my hair, I was moving my neck around and then it just seemingly broke. My head was stuck bent over to my left shoulder and I could not move it without searing pain. Long story short, my mom gave me a muscle relaxer for my competition that day and my head was stuck like this for 3 days. Story 50. When I was a teenager, broke my leg in such a way that I knocked both bones off my ankle's growth pad, basically dislocated my foot from my leg, cracked the tibia big bone and snapped my fibula in half. Fun side note, I also found out that day that I have a super high resistance to the effects of morphine. I have a pretty high pain tolerance, but after the doctor manually set the bones, which took about 10 seconds or so and required 3 assistants to hold me down, all I could do was cry and beg them not to touch it again. Story 51. 10 months ago, my answer would have been passing a kidney stone the shape of a crescent moon out of my penis. Then my wife gave birth to our daughter. I was holding her hand when she started pushing. I've never known such hand strength in my entire life. All the bones in my hand felt crushed together into a single finger. Fortunately, my wife's yelling masked my screaming. Story 52. My friends and I wanted to launch a golf ball-sized rock with a water balloon launcher. It was the type where 2 people hold each end and one person pulls the launcher back to release the balloon. Rock in this case. Unfortunately for me, the rock got stuck in the launcher and slung back and launched directly into my shin, full force. I still have a dent in my shin bone. I don't wish that pain on anyone. Story 53. 80. Collapsed lung. All of those chest tubes going in and out is absolutely awful, but what's worse is waking up after the surgery. I had a mechanical pleurodesis done. It's basically where they graft your lung to your chest wall. They do this by scraping the outside of your lung and the membrane surrounding it with sandpaper-like gauze until it is raw, and, this way when it heals, it will grow together. It is a startling amount of pain when you come to. I have had small-bore chest tubes pencil and large-bore chest tubes thumb inserted through my ribcage through the cartilage between my ribs while fully conscious with only painkillers. They shove these tubes a full foot into your chest and you feel every single millimeter. It feels like being impaled with a red-hot, blunt Sharpie. They do not normally leave you conscious for this, but my first collapsed lung was so severe they were shoving a tube in my chest 3 minutes after walking through the door. The second time I had it done was due to Dr. Error Surgeon. The surgeon removed my chest tube in my hospital bed and stitched me up. I knew something was wrong because it felt like someone had taken a shop vac to my lung and I could not speak. He took some x-rays and sure enough my lung had collapsed all over again and I had a sucking chest wound. When I coughed the hole in my side would. I have never experienced such a strange combination of hilarity and grave concern. So then the surgeon had to do emergency surgery right there on my hospital bed, called in nurses and assistants, the whole shebang. So that's when he shoved that big tube right through the hole he just pulled it out of. By far the worst experience of my life. I did not intend for this post to be so long, but there you have it, deal with it. Story 54. Abscess tooth infection. Happened to me 2 months ago. One of my wisdom teeth was allowed to grow in place of a molar that just never came in. So the wisdom tooth grew into its place and was just fine. But it cracked. I thought nothing of it. It wasn't hurting me or anything, and I hate dentists, so I didn't get it fixed. WLP 4 years later, all of a sudden, I get a sharp pain on the right side of my mouth. I wanted to get it extracted, got an emergency appointment with my dentist, and he wanted to save it so we scheduled an appointment with the endodontist for a root canal. This was set up about 4 or 5 days after the initial appointment. Get in there, the endodontist says, I could try to fix it, but it'd probably be a waste of time. I think you should get it extracted, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. Holy, just get it out of me. Schedule an appointment at a dental surgeon the next day to get it extracted. He pulls it out no problem in like 5 minutes, and I immediately feel relief and I go back into work an hour later after missing a full week of work with this tooth pain. That pain lasted for about 2 weeks until it was extracted. The only thing that would help was muscle relaxers and weed. So I stayed at my mom and dad's, brought my stash, and just smoked dope for a week and played video games. But man, I literally couldn't do anything. That sucked. And I wouldn't wish that upon anybody in the world except my ex, that feeling my perineum and clitoris rip during childbirth, especially when the doctors don't catch the upwards tear. It took close to 4 months for the pain to cease. Story 55. Tooth pain. Cracked a wisdom tooth in half. I didn't get it fixed for 1 year because I didn't have dental insurance. Then it started hurting. I went to the dentist about the pain. They took x-rays and sent me to a specialist. The nerve for my whole right-hand side lower jaw went directly between 2 of that tooth's roots. It was that nerve that was picking up the pain and that nerve that they risked severing when they took it out. Just to put that pain into perspective, I was once in a car accident that broke both my arms, both ankles, left tibia, both knees, both femurs, my left hip and a hairline fracture of my pelvis. The tooth pain was far worse. Story 56. Staph infection that got so bad very quickly that it had sunk close down to the bone of my knee, getting dry socket on one of the holes where my wisdom tooth had been less than 24 hours before. Playing street hockey with no equipment and clashing sticks together, so that the street hockey puck, the ones with the metal wheels, went fully vertically into the air and hit me in the eye. Story 57. I grew up with pets all my life, and we've had two animals that left us on bad terms. Boots was a pure breed dust mop who was the family dog. He looked a lot like a tan Chewbacca. He was getting into his adult years when he got very sick suddenly, and my parents were about to take him to the vet. I went to love on the dog. I'm like 14 at the time, and my dad scolded me for with the dog when there were chores to do. This was a Friday. Saturday morning we got a call from the vet that Boots had died overnight at the vet. The vet did an autopsy, and the dog had shredded one of my stuffed animals and ingested the netting inside. It had formed a blockage, and by the time that he showed symptoms it was too late. I still have some pent-up resentment from my dad about him not letting me say goodbye to my best friend. The other was earlier, but we had adopted a stray cat and named it Felix, and like all outside cats, Felix was an ecological disaster for the local wildlife. So our neighbor's wife, who told a 9-year-old me they were going to have my dog's voice box removed because she barked, left out antifreeze for Felix the cat, and we lost him soon after. I was devastated. My mom went from classy lady to oaky white trash, but my dad called her off and had a discussion with Mr. Tommy the husband. I would take a paper cut on my glands before having a pet die.